The only reason why we try to predict the future is not really to be right or wrong, but to be helpful, to try and help us guide our decisions today. And so we're really just kind of trying to predict the present, which is hard enough.
Hey everybody, welcome to the show. This is Brave New Work, a podcast about reinventing our organizations and the search for a more adaptive and human way of working. I'm Aaron Dignan, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Rodney Evans.
Hey there.
Today we are also joined by Kevin Kelly, who needs no introduction, but is also the senior Maverick at Wired and the author of a bunch of books that made me, shape and change my career. Kevin, welcome to the show.
It's my privilege and delight to be here. Thank you.
On today's episode, we're going to talk about the very small topic of the future. But before we do that, we have to check in, because we check in at the beginning of every podcast.
We have to. And we would clearly be fired
we enjoy it.
From this job if we didn't. Yes. So Kevin, hopefully you are down to participate in our check-in round where I ask each of us the same question. And the question that I have for today is a bit meta. It is, what is one question that we should be asking ourselves right now? Aaron, why don't you kick us off? Okay.
The question I've been really confronted with, being just sort of trapped at home and with less on the plate lately, is what do I really want to do with my time? Not what do I need to do, not what must I do, but what do I want to do, and what makes me feel, healthy and connected and sustainable. And I've been experimenting with that with some really bad habits and some really good habits, both on a day-to-day basis.
Nice. Awesome.
Yeah.
Kevin, what about you? What's one question that we should be asking ourselves?
I think in this time of huge uncertainty, I think the question that I am asking myself, and might be something others would ask, is what am I wrong about? What are we wrong about? And I think when you kind of looking forward into the future, we're really shaped by a lot of our assumptions that we don't question. Mm-hmm. And I am certain that we're really wrong about some big things, but of course I don't know what it is. And so I'm always trying to test myself to be open to being really, really wrong about some basic assumptions that we now hold. So that I'll be less surprised when the future does unfold in a certain different direction.
Mm.
Fantastic. For me, a question that I would like for us to be asking ourselves collectively, and I certainly am individually, is how do we come out of this unprecedented time with a truly new normal? We have this moment to shed and shape and consider all of the ways that, our own behaviors and patterns and systems led to this moment. And how do we not just recreate all of the worst parts of ourselves and our society on the other side of it? So
back to the norm.
I'm asking that question multiple times every day, particularly as I read Twitter. Okay, so Kevin, we're super excited to have you here to talk about the future and just sort of see where it all goes. Let's just start with a really simple one, which is it possible to predict the future, or to what extent do you think it's possible?
So I think it's not very possible to predict the future in any kind of specific detail that, as we might want to, that there is a very, very complicated system of this society with 7-8 billion people all interacting, which makes any kind of deterministic system really unlikely. Having said that, we can't really predict the future in any detail. There are things about these kinds of systems that are predictable because they are systems. And so there are some things that we should expect to continue, for one thing. So one of the true things we can say about these large, complicated systems is that mostly they're going to be doing what they did yesterday. So at one level, there are all the things that probably don't change very much. And that's kind of a prediction. to say, well, a lot of the stuff is just going to continue along as it was. Um, so, my vision is that in general, we can predict some kind of trends, some kind of general outlines, as if this was like a river going down a valley. It's meandering, but we can't predict where the exact course of that water is going to be, but we can say, well, it's going to flow in this valley, and here are the limits to where it goes back and forth, and we can generally say it's going to go for certain downhill. And so we can kind of say some things about the future. And even though we can't make some specific predictions, we can still predict certain things which are useful. And so that's kind of a long way of saying we can't predict the future in detail, but we can predict some parts of the future in general form.
And when you're thinking about that, particularly in a moment like this, where maybe the near-term future is a little bit harder to see, what kinds of thinking tools or lenses do you use? Like what are you looking at human behavior patterns? Are you looking at trends? I know in your book Inevitables you explored a lot of like kind of techno-human patterns. Just talk a little bit about what kinds of lenses you like to put on that.
Most of the really good futurists that I know, and I would say good in the sense of being maybe above average and being able to talk about where we've come, are people who have become really good historians. And so there is a sense in which kind of the first fundamental take on things is to take a long running start, is to look at what's been going on, because in fact, a lot of what will be around tomorrow is what has been here for a while. And
totally,
even in technology, the people forget that if you look around yourself right now, today, wherever you are, most of the technology that it's within arm's reach of you is old stuff, is old inventions, have been around for a long time. Concrete, electrical lighting, wooden tables, whatever it is, it's going to be mostly old stuff. And in the future, whether it's 100 years or even 500 years, most of the stuff is going to be old stuff, things that were invented long ago. And just as we look around life today in biology, and most of the biomass on this planet are ancient forms of bacteria. And even the grasses and stuff, it's most of the biomass. We're enamored of these really rare, charismatic creatures that we make nature movies about, which actually are very, very tiny part of the whole system. And so we are often kind of blindsided by the novelty and newness of the technologies that are kind of new and they're not quite working, and they're just stuff that was recently invented. But in fact, most of our lives are being governed by stuff that has been around for a long time. So going back into the past is one of the first ways that we look at, and we try to find, ongoing trends or behaviors or dynamics that have been going on for a while, and, probably statistically will continue. So, an example for me is progress. So progress is not the mark of human endeavor, but over the last 200 years, it has been. So there's been a sense for 200 years, despite wars and all kinds of things, there has been a few percent improvement over time. And it's not guaranteed that would continue, but that's statistically very likely to continue if we have everything else that makes progress going. So going back into the past for one thing. And the second thing is I try to, and I think it's really good that we, going back to what I was saying in the beginning, is to open our mind to possibilities and believing in the impossible. So a lot of sort of what happens seems unlikely at that time. But what will happen is likely at, what will be normal tomorrow or in the future can seem unlikely at this moment.
Right.
And just as some of the things that we have today would be kind of unlikely someone, 100, 200 years ago. If you told farmers that in America that most of their descendants would never farm again, that they're the last in their ancient lineage of farmers, they would never farm again, they would say, what were they going to be doing?
Or
And
even 50, 60 years ago. I mean, you
even
look at an
50,
episode of
60
The
years ago.
Jetsons and nobody
Right.
has a handheld. It's like we
Right.
totally missed that.
So we would say, well, we're going to be web designers and yoga teachers and stuff. And they say, what? That's ridiculous. People pay you for that? And so I think part of looking into the future is trying to be open to the improbable and impossible. And it's a very fine line, because when you start to talk about the future and you trot out something that seems improbable, if it's too improbable, no one's going to believe you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
If it's
tinfoil
not
hat time.
improbable enough, then it's unlikely to be true. And so there's a very kind of fine line between being helpful and describing something that's unlikely and still plausible. The only reason why we try to predict the future is not really to be right or wrong, but to be helpful, to try and help us guide our decisions today. And so we're really just kind of trying to predict the present, which is hard enough. I mean, actually try to see what's going on.
Right. What's
And that would
actually
be-
happening?
Right.
What
And that
does
would
it
be the
mean?
third thing that I was saying is really. So one thing is you look to the past. The second one is you kind of believe the impossible in the future. And the third one is you really, really try to understand what's actually going on right now today, which is much harder than it sounds.
Yeah, it's I'm thinking as you're saying all of this, Kevin. There are a couple of follow-up things that I just want to ask you about, which is a lot of it feels like a way of thinking or certain kinds of questioning to do. If you were someone early in your journey as a futurist thinker, like how do you help people get into that mindset? Because
Yeah.
it sounds exactly intuitively right. And I'm also like, yeah, cool. How would I do that?
Yeah. So I did this beautiful exercise with Brian Eno, who is one of the most creative thinkers that I know about. He's not just a musician or a painter. He's actually a very interesting thinker. And you've heard maybe the term lateral thinking.
Mm-hmm.
He's one of the most lateral thinkers that I know about. And we did, there are exercises. There are kind of like tricks. There are methods that can aid you. Just as like if you were a painter or a photographer or artist, there are kind of methods about noticing. I mean, a lot of what comedians and artists do is they're noticing things and they're paying attention to things. And so there are ways you can kind of train yourself to pay attention. But there's also, I think, a way in which you can kind of train yourself to be imaginative and to be thinking. And that's, I think, maybe the quality that I think is necessary when thinking about the future is to be imaginative and, again, transcending the things that everybody knows, because often most of what everybody knows is true, right? I mean, but a lot of the things everybody knows is also not true, and it's
Right.
It's hard to. I mean, you can't just because something everybody knows, you can't deny that, reject it. There's kind of an art in this kind of a creative way of going beyond your assumptions and looking at things a little differently. And so one of those tricks is to we call them unthinkables, is to kind of go through things that seem to be unthinkable and to try to make a case for them, to try to say, well, your first reaction was, that's impossible. And then you say, well, what if someone came back from the future and they told you that it really was that way? How would we have gotten there? What would have happened along the way so that we got there? And so that exercise of kind of forcing yourself to imagine a different way, and like as if you were an alien, is sort of one of the ways. The other way I think, is what I call like listening to the technology, listening to science. Science is in the business of trying to not let us fool ourselves, as trying to help us. It's the way that we know things for sure, but we don't really ever know them for sure. We know them kind of temporarily, but it's this way of kind of testing things. And so I think paying attention to science, the things that it finds out, which often start off with somebody looking at something weird that doesn't make any sense, those anomalies, and so they're kind of just, you're looking at the odd things, the things that kind of don't have a good explanation. And so in that kind of, in the weirdness of the world, in the fringes, in those areas where there's a little bit of evidence that what we thought was true might not be. And I think that sense of going to the edges, going to science, which is, the lives at the frontier and the edge. I think that's a second way of kind of spending time so that you can become better at imagining what could be.
Yeah, those are amazing exercises to go through. And just like as a person who spends most of my time working in really large organizations, a few things really resonate with me about what you said that I just want to say out loud to all of my homies that are working in those bureaucracies right now. One is like in the quality of noticing and sort of being a world-class noticer, there's a necessity to suspend judgment in that if you're going
Right.
to just pay attention.
Right.
And then when you talk about being imaginative in terms of the future, that also asks you to like suspend some judgmental and some controlling behaviors. It's like a lot of what you're describing is in some ways like counterintuitive to the way that people want to think about the future inside of systems. But I mean, it makes absolute sense, and you're absolutely right. And even when you talk about the odd things on the fringes, it's like how many times in a company is there a thing that pops or a product that pops or a piece of data that pops, but because it doesn't fit into a rational construct, it gets ignored, rather than someone saying like, what's going on? Let's get more curious about that. So I think those exercises would be so helpful to just get people out of the typical way of being. Yes. In a lot of systems.
You're absolutely right. And that sense of trying to look at the edges and the thing that was unnoticed that maybe we should pay more attention to is also part of the reason why diversity is so important in organizations, because you have people who can look at something a little differently. The challenge with diversity, and the challenge with these sort of marginal signals of the edge, is that most of the time they aren't important.
Right.
Right. I mean, there's a crazy guy on the edge who's got tinfoil on his head and stuff, but he may say something that actually is profound. And in that moment, it's very difficult to kind of navigate your way through it. So there is kind of an art to it. There is a little bit of having other ways to test these things as they're brought forth, and that is sort of, that's sort of the craft part of dealing with, because you can't just look at everything out on the fringes, because then you're just swamped with lots of stuff that doesn't go anywhere. Most startups fail. How do you find the 1% that aren't going to fail? Well, that's a craft. That's an art. But it is important that we have these diversities of viewpoints, diversities of backgrounds, diversities of different ways of working, and different styles of work. All these things are important because they help find those things more than an homogeneous, monolithic system or culture would. But having said that, you need that. You need that homogeneous core. There's lots of good things that does. You need that commonality. You have to have a system that has both those attributes.
We always talk on this show that everything about good organization and systems design is a bit of a paradox or a polarity,
Right.
where it's like we need coherence, but not too much.
Right, exactly.
You know, we need
Right.
to listen to the fringe, but not overly indexed.
Yeah,
and
right,
so
right,
yeah, it's
exactly.
all about like this Goldilocks game of balance, which is actually what I think, you know, real systems management looks like these days.
Well,
I am
mean,
curious.
this is what biology does too. By
Yeah.
the way, I mean, it's like it's not is you know the I love the analogy of your hand. Like if your hand is too loose, it just flops around. If it's too tight, it's a fist. But in between, there is this your dexterous manipulability comes from this in between state where it's neither too rigid nor too floppy.
Right. And it's a hand. We know it's a hand. Like that's
Right.
the level of coherence I need. You know, my hand is a hand, you know, and then if it gets worse than that, then it's too much.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, given that we have been confronted with some new data about humanity and markets and, you know, all these things that are going on right now, in what way has the novel coronavirus changed or reinforced your thoughts about the future or people or both?
Well, you know, I did have one kind of realization, which was, you know, let's say 10 years ago, you would sort of say, okay, you know, in America in 2020, there's going to be this pandemic and they're going to close down everything. You're
Right.
going to stay in, you have to stay
home.
inside. And so you would say, well, the next thing that's going to happen is there going to be riots on the street. People are going to be shooting each other.
Right.
And that didn't happen. That did not happen.
No. There's
And
even
so-
still milk at the grocery store. I was there
Yeah,
this
I
morning.
know. And
with gloves and a
people
mask,
are,
but they're nonetheless.
they're kind of walking around, walking their dogs. It's like that craziness that anybody in the business of writing stories about the future would suggest that would be the thing that would happen right away.
Right.
And it didn't. So I think that's important. I think that's really important because it suggests that, you know, maybe our civilization runs a little deeper than we give it credit for. That I mean, it's not to say this won't happen if we kept going for another year or 2 years. Who knows? But it's certainly more robust than I think we thought.
Yeah, a small push wasn't enough.
Right. And so that gives me a lot of optimism about our ability to try and find our way through this. There is right now, as Rodney says, there's a kind of a sense of like, well, this is a reset button. We get to reset things, and I think there is a certain amount of that. But one of the things that I think is going to be clear is that a pandemic is sort of going to be like we're in now the pandemic zone. Our urbanization, whatever it is, 75% urban on the planet, this cheap travel, all this kind of stuff has made a world in which this is sort of like our new illness. And whether it's Corona, COVID-19, or whatever comes next, 2021, there'll be others. And so I think we now have to kind of, get ready and figure out, well, like, what is our proper response? Is it to close down? Is it to have social distancing? What is it? And we'll invent systems for this because it will happen again, and presumably, we'll learn from it, and it will happen in a different way, and we'll have, no matter what the virus is, we'll have a little bit more prepared for it, and then the question is, well, is it capable of bringing us together? Will globalization increase, or will we have an allergic reaction to it? That's where we get the reset button. That's where we get to choose. I have my hopes about how it is that we're going to go, but I think it's still early to make a prediction about which way we are going to go.
I'm so curious about sort of where you started in that answer around, there being an assumption or a prediction that when something like this happens, it's like, riots and chaos. And I am not a person who, writes about the future or thinks deeply in the same way that you and your peers do. But where my mind goes when I hear something like that is like, I feel like similar to water sort of flowing downstream, like I sense that human beings adapt quickly, but as incrementally as possible, usually. So it's interesting to me that there would be an assumption that that's the response, because my intuitive assumption is people will actually change as little as they possibly can change. And for me, like, doing my job here instead of on a plane, or like, watching Netflix with a friend on video instead of on my couch, like that's the level of change that I'm doing because it's the level I have to do. And I'm not really doing any more than that. So like, how does that work? Like the sort of more radical prediction versus human nature's basic desire to retain the status quo.
No, I think you're absolutely right that for all that we talk about, our human love for novelty, in actual fact, we also don't want to change. It's that's another one of those paradoxes where we crave both, stability for ourselves and change for other people, basically. And so
that is so true.
I think if we have to imagine, if this virus would get worse, or we had another one that was worse, that the parts where we don't change are something we shouldn't forget about. Jeff Bezos, the Amazon founder, made a really profound statement where he said he wanted to make a business that was based on the things that didn't change. And he said, what's not going to change is people want more selection and cheaper prices. He says that's going to be true forever. I want to make a business around that. And so I do think that while, people like myself are looking for all the new things, that, looking and paying attention to the things that aren't going to change is also a very powerful lens to try to look at the future and to say, well, families, the bond of children, the need for belonging, all those things are very fundamental, and we can kind of extend those and assume that they're going to be there for a very long time. What kind of a world does that make? And so,
in some ways, it's the two together
yes.
that is so powerful, right? Like Amazon didn't just recognize that we like low prices and quality; they also recognized we were going to buy friggin' everything online,
right?
And nobody was doing that at the time. So it's this weird collision of one insight about something that will change with a bunch of insights about things that won't change that seems to be really powerful.
That's you're absolutely right. And it's not just that no one believed it, but people actually denied it. People,
right, they actively thought it was insane.
I mean, I remember a New York Times technology writer who said that never in the history of the world would people ever buy cars online, would they ever buy a banana online. It's just absolute categorical refusal to believe that was possible. And so you're right, it is that combination of believing or understanding that both of those dynamics are at work, the unchanging nature and this idea that we could have new ways of maybe exhibiting those same drives.
Along those lines, I'm curious, one of your recent books, The Inevitables, there were a lot of statements made in there about things that were going to happen or that were going to shape the future. How has the pandemic maybe accelerated some of those patterns or challenged some of those patterns? Have you thought about that yet?
Not too much. As Rodney says, my for better or worse, my day has not changed at all. I've been working at home for decades. I've been, do Zencaster and pocket. So I have not seen a lot of change other than I'm now wearing a mask when I'm interacting with people outside. So which, by the way, is sort of the normal thing in Japan.
Right. Anyway, and you've already been used to that on your travels.
We could get to that point where, wearing masks in dense areas might become the norm. That's not unbelievable. So far, yeah. I mean, I think that the thing that people are discovering is that doing teleconferencing, Zooming, this kind of remote stuff, had more viability than maybe they thought, because they tried it, but never really forced to kind of really do their work that way. Even though that technology that we're using is at least 2 decades old, it hasn't changed at all. It's sort of remarkable how unchanged this Zoom is. I mean,
right.
We had that
Slack
20
is
years
just
ago.
In-room chat, and Zoom is just
It's
old video protocol.
Yeah, and so I guess the only thing I see is that I think I could imagine, the things I've been talking about that haven't happened, like VR and AR, maybe being accelerated in terms of development. But I'm not sure. Electronic voting or kinds of doing other work by remotely, I think is possible. I don't know if I talked about inevitable, but I have talked about other places where I thought working remote was a mode that would become normal for everybody, even if they weren't remote. That you would work remotely next to the person sitting next to you in an office. That you would take on those behaviors, those technologies, and so I could maybe see that happening. But I would say in general, I am still in the uncertain mode about the coronavirus in terms of what its long-term impact is going to be. Like you, I hope that this opportunity would make us move in the direction that I wanted even before the virus, right? So that would be my desires. I don't know. I think the uncertainty around it is so huge. And again, going back to what I was saying, I think our understanding of this is actually, we're at the really beginning. I think there's lots of things we don't understand about the virus that we're going to be kind of surprised by later on. There's just some weird heterogeneity in the way it kind of displays itself around the world that we don't understand. And so when I look out with the lens of looking over the coronavirus and saying, what impact does it have? To me, I feel that it's just really, really uncertain. And the best way, one of the techniques that we use in the business for dealing with that is to have scenarios, plural, is to have multiple visions. And the intent of that is to rehearse kind of the corner cases of what would happen, so that when whatever does happen in that field is not a surprise to us.
Yeah, we have some preparedness.
We're prepared for those edge cases, knowing that what happens in the middle, we're still covered. And so that's the value of this process called scenario thinking, which is that you're kind of mapping out the valley, the field, the limits of what could be, so that you can prepare for whatever way it goes. And I think that's probably what we have to do with the coronavirus is really have multiple scenarios.
Yeah, and it would have been great if we had done that before.
Well, in fact, we have. I was involved with them.
Right.
Yes, I was involved with a number of scenarios, things with pandemics.
True.
And those were all sitting on shelves.
Yeah, they're all out there. They're just
not
out
being
there.
Read. They were known from the people who were involved, and like the movie Contagion with Larry Brilliant was involved, and we were involved in. That was a scenario. It was one of the scenarios, but not the only one. So they were known and available, but you have to have leadership who make use of that resource.
No doubt. It's funny you mentioned VR and AR, because in a prior recording, Rodney and I were joking that had it been just a little bit further along, this would have been its shining moment, right? Like if everybody had an Oculus at home already, it would have been, gangbusters, but they missed the wave. So,
and my vision, my current kind of the way I would describe this AR world and the VR world, but mostly AR, is smart glasses. And so if you could pick up a pair of glasses that was sitting next to your monitor and put them on and have a little bit of a more spatial view by putting on those smart glasses, that enabled you to kind of see a room full of people and talk to them with your looking them in the eye.
The Iron Man glasses.
Would you pick them up and wear them? Absolutely, 100%.
All day.
You definitely would do that. And so I think we're kind of a decade. I think that's a decade in terms of the mainstream adoption of that. So if this had happened a decade later, we would be there. But I suspect we are going to see viruses come through again in the next
doubt.
decade.
One final question for you, Kevin. Is there a gap between the future that you expect and the future that you want to see? And if so, what is that gap?
Yeah. So I'm not much of a worrier, and even in technology, but the one thing that I'm sort of unhappy with is the state of, say, what we'll call it broadly, science fiction. So most of us, our visions of the future are shaped by the books and primarily the movies that we see. It's inevitable because there are hundreds of millions of dollars put into these stories, and they're very well done, and they're supremely crafted, and the people who tell these stories know how to tell a story, and all of them are dystopian. Okay, so because it just makes a better story,
right?
Because you have to have villains. You've got to have all this stuff, conflict and stuff, and so a kind of a very optimistic view of the future are very rare, and I would describe an optimistic view as a future that you or I would want to live in. So like, okay. A story about 100 years from now when we have ubiquitous artificial intelligence, ubiquitous augmented reality, ubiquitous gene editing, ubiquitous monitoring, surveillance. And tell me, and then how does that all work together? So I actually want to live there. That's actually a very difficult thing to do.
It's a tough puzzle.
It's a tough puzzle. And I think part of what I am trying to do is to describe that future, because my belief is that it's very hard to make a future unless you can imagine it beforehand, unless you can see it, unless you can envision it. It's hard to make it's hard to get to one of those futures accidentally. And so I think the idea of having a picture in our head really helps make it come about. And if the actual influence of science fiction on the real world was ever really cataloged, it would be immense. People would say, all the kind of people working on the iPhone who saw the communicator in Star Trek and said, I want to make that thing, or the tricorder in health. So so having a vision of where we want to head to is really, really important, particularly in the kind of cultural, social parts of it, not just the tech, in terms of imagining a world. And so what I'm in my work trying to do is to imagine this very techie world that has all these things, and to describe a way in which it's a world that I want to live in. Mm-hmm. And the ideal way to do that would be then you would backtrack from that, and you would have, if we were going to have that in 100 years, what we would need in 50 years, and then
make it happen
in 20 years. And then you can start to direct our ways to that. And in the futurist business, that's called a normative scenario. That's when where you're choosing to make that the norm. And that's a little different process than just trying to imagine what might be, because often what happens is not so much what you want to happen, but that's what's going to happen. And so that gap, as you call it, is, for me, I think that my role and what I can bring and what I'm good at is actually just trying to describe that vision, to actually paint that picture to try to make it in a plausible world. It's very difficult to do for several reasons, and among them is the fact that these are all interacting things, and if you've got, I don't know, if you've got laser things over here, then you've got to have laser guns over there, and you have to have this, and so it's a complicated, complex system with many variables, and it's very hard to imagine that. And the second thing is there are lots of technologies like big data, monitoring and surveillance, where we have only a single vision of what the future of that is, and that's 1984 Big Brother. And to imagine civilized versions of ubiquitous tracking is really, really difficult. So those are the kinds of things that make imagining that world hard.
Well, certainly I hope that we can all find a future that we'd actually be excited to live in. That feels like a really great place to draw things to a close. Kevin, thank you so much for your time. It has been an absolute pleasure having you on.
It's really, really been a joy and a lot of fun, and I appreciate you're asking great questions.
So y'all, we really appreciate the reviews that you've been sending. Please send them. Please also share. Pushing this link to the people who need it is why we do this, and we cannot do that without you. So get out there and spam your friends.
Spam away. Quick tip of the hat to Taylor Marvin for making us sound good every week. Brave New Work is produced by The Ready, where we help organizations around the world change the way they work. You can get in touch with us by emailing podcast@theready.com. If you're thinking about a transformation of your own, feel free to email hello@theready.com, and we will say hello back. And as for you, thanks so much for listening. Now go change something.